Investors are snatching up properties. It has a lot of you asking us, are we in a housing bubble?
Yeah, and what happens if that bubble bursts? Where do we go from here? Our Chris Holmstrom has that story.
It's no secret Portland is a hotspot, from food to the music to the outdoors. But there's also a downside to being on everyone's best of list: housing. Welcome to the Rose City, home to more than 600,000 people, a number that keeps growing.
This house is so amazing. I love the colors and the trim. That's a really great detail.
It's a dream home for Samantha Gladue, a 1920s bungalow in the Montsavilla neighborhood.
The kitchen is great. These counters are beautiful. I haven't seen that before.
Gladue, originally from Colorado, has lived in Portland for 8 years. And just this year, she decided it was time to buy a home with her husband.
We've had houses that we put in an offer, and there are 24 other offers. Things are going for about $30,000 over right now.
According to Zillow, the median home value is $360,000. A number that has grown nearly 20% over the past year, and Zillow predicts will rise more than 5% within the next year. And with those higher prices comes the prospect of an inflating housing bubble. Still, though, it's cheaper than other West Coast cities. That's part of the reason why Krista Jurassic and her husband want to relocate to Portland from the Bay Area.
We live in California. We've been looking since last spring.
One of the main attractions, Portland's hot restaurant scene. She and her husband have taken several trips in the past year.
The houses are there, we see them, but it's by the time we get up here, even like 2 or 3 days later, they've either accepted offers, they're pending, multiple offers.
It's the same story for transplants and the natives. Peter Park is a local realtor and blogger for pdxblog.com.
Definitely in the last 6 years, it has grown substantially. It's totally turned into a different city.
Park credits the local economy, the growth in the technology sector, and the fact that to some, Portland is a desirable place to live.
I don't think there's going to be a slowdown anytime soon this year, maybe next year or the year after.
He says since the recession, the demand for housing has increased due to cash investors and record low interest rates. He believes Portland is not in a housing bubble, at least not yet. He calls the term psychological.
The question is whether the Portland market does provide that value for the current price being offered for its housing market. And I think for the most part, yes.
Park says it's important that we understand the difference between what happened back in 2008 when the housing bubble burst. Back then, the housing demand skyrocketed due to loose lending standards. This ultimately led to a financial meltdown. However, in 2016, Park says there has been a huge demand, same as pre-2008, with many investors jumping into the housing market. The difference is that in today's market, lending standards are very strict. Park says most economists agree that we are not in a housing bubble, but a low supply situation because the building industry hasn't quite caught up with demand yet. He also says prices are high because more families are moving to Oregon, many of them with a higher income. Regardless, it's not stopping people from wanting to live the American dream. Some so determined to stay in Portland, they're moving to areas east of 82nd and into North Portland, areas that Park calls up and coming.
A lot of those neighborhoods out there are actually great, and they're revitalizing. Those neighborhood associations are working very hard to make sure that their neighborhood stays safe.
Take this Montsavilla bungalow at 90th and Pine. A year ago, it was sold for $224,000. Now it's more than $100,000 more. For Gladue and her husband, it's worth it, even if that means moving away from her inner southeast Portland neighborhood.
I want to stay in my neighborhood, but that's very close in southeast Portland, and those houses are going for $500,000 plus. So we're looking further out.
And it's not just home buyers being impacted, renters also feeling the pinch. In fact, between February and March, apartment rents in Portland have increased 14% with no sign of slowing down. Reporting in Portland, I'm Chris Holmstrom for KOIN 6 News.